Okay, this evening we're reading Prosser, Wade, and Schwartz, Torts, Cases and Materials. This is the 12th edition, starting on page 81, which is part of Chapter 2, the intentional interference with person or property. Within Section 8, conversion. Letter A, nature of the tort. And this is going to be demonstrated in the case of Pearson v. Dodd of the United States Court of Appeals, District of Columbia Circuit in 1969. The judge writes, this case arises out of the exposure of the alleged misdeeds of Senator Thomas Dodd of Connecticut by newspaper columnists Drew Pearson and Jack Anderson. The district court has granted partial summary judgment to Senator Dodd, appellee here, finding liability on the theory of conversion. At the same time, the court denied partial summary judgment on the theory of invasion of privacy. Both branches of the court's judgment are before us on interlocutory appeal. We affirm the district court's denial of summary judgment for invasion of privacy and reverse its grant of summary judgment for conversion. The undisputed facts in the case were stated by the district court as follows. On several occasions in June and July of 1965, two former employees of the plaintiff, at times with the assistance of two members of the plaintiff's staff, entered the plaintiff's office without authority and, unbeknownst to him, removed numerous documents from his files, made copies of them, replaced the originals, and turned over the copies to the defendant Anderson, who was aware of the manner in which the copies had been obtained. The defendants Pearson and Anderson thereafter published articles containing the information gleaned from these documents. So those are the facts. The court also discussed the separate count of invasion of privacy, and that's in parentheses because it seems to be a myth. The district court ruled that appellants' receipt and subsequent use of photocopies of documents which appellants knew had been removed from appellee's files without authorization established appellant's liability for conversion. We conclude that appellants are not guilty of conversion on the facts shown. So they're going to disagree with the district court. Dean Prosser has remarked that conversion is the forgotten tort. That it is not entirely forgotten is attested by the case before us. History has largely defined its contours which we should now follow, except where they derive from clearly obsolete practices or abandoned theories. Conversion is the substantive tort theory which underlay an ancient common law form of action for trover. A plaintiff in trover alleged that he had lost a chattel which he rightfully possessed, and that the defendant had found it and converted it to his own use. With time, the allegations of losing and finding became fictional, leaving the question of whether the defendant had converted the property and the only operative one. The most distinctive feature of conversion is its measure of damages, which is the value of the goods converted. The theory is that the converting defendant has in some way treated the goods as if they were his own, so that the plaintiff can properly ask the court to decree a forced sale of the property from the rightful possessor to the converter. Because of this stringent measure of damages, it has long been recognized that not every wrongful interference with the personal property of another is a conversion. Where the intermeddling falls short of the complete or very substantial deprivation of possessory rights in the property, the tort committed is not real conversion, but the lesser wrong of trespass to chattels. the restatement, and I think we're applying that to the facts. Or we're just still speaking of theory. The restatement second of torts has marked the distinction by defining conversion as an intentional exercise of dominion or control over a chattel which so seriously interferes with the right of another to control it that the actor may justly be required to pay the other the full value of the chattel. Less serious interferences fall under the restatement's definition of trespass to chattels. The difference is more than a semantic one. The measure of damages in trespass is not the whole value of the property interfered with, but rather the actual diminution in its value caused by the interference. More important for this case, a judgment for conversion can be obtained with only nominal damages, whereas liability for trespass to chattel exists only on a showing of actual damage to the property interfered with. Here, the district court granted partial summary judgment on the issue of liability alone, while conceding that possibly no more than nominal damages might be awarded on subsequent trial. Partial summary judgment for liability could not have been granted on the theory of trespass to chattels without an undisputed showing of actual damages to the property in question. It is clear that on the agreed facts, appellants committed no conversion of the physical documents taken from appellee's files. Those documents were removed from the files at night, photocopied, and returned to the files undamaged before office operations resumed in the morning. Insofar as the documents' value to appellee resided in their usefulness as records of the business of his office, appellee was clearly not substantially deprived of his use of them. This, of course, is not an end of the matter. It has long been recognized that documents often have value above and beyond that springing from their physical possession. They may embody information or ideas whose economic value depends in part or in whole upon being kept secret. The question then arises whether the information taken by means of copying appellee's office files is a type which the law of conversion protects. The general rule has been that ideas or information are not subject to legal protection, but the law has developed exceptions to this rule, where information is gathered and arranged at some cost and sold as a commodity on the market. It is properly protected as property. Where ideas are formulated with labor and inventive genius, as in the case of literary works or scientific researches, they are protected. Where they constitute instruments of fair and effective commercial competition, those who develop them may gather their fruits under the protection of the law. The question here is not whether appellee had a right to keep his files from prize, but whether the information taken from those files falls under the protection of law of property. Protection of the law of property, enforceable by a suit for conversion. In our view, it does not. The information included the contents of letters to appellee from supplicants and office records of other kinds, the nature of which is not fully revealed by the record. Insofar as we can tell, none of it amounts to literary property, to scientific invention, or to secret plans formulated by appellee for the conduct of commerce. Nor does it appear to be information held in any way for sale by appellee, analogous to the fresh news copy produced by a wire service. Because no conversion of the physical contents of appellee's files took place, and because the information copied from the documents in those files has not been shown to be property subject to protection by suit for conversion, the district court's ruling that appellants are guilty of conversion must be reversed, so ordered. There are some notes and questions. So, I'm just underlining here that the analysis involved other cases that noted that literary property, scientific invention, or other secret plans for the conduct of commerce have shown to be protected by law of property, in cases. Now in the notes and questions section, conversion is a tort whose detailed complications exceed the time that can conveniently be allotted to it in any torts course. There are thousands of conversion cases, but most of them have been concerned only with settling the title to disputed goods, and there are relatively few in which the tort itself has been an issue. The topic of conversion has tended to be shunted back and forth between the courses in torts and property, and so to be covered in neither. Many of the practical problems relating to title and conversion are covered in Chapter 2 of the Uniform Commercial Code and law school courses in sales or commercial law. 2. The hand of history lies heavily on the tort. It is the lineal descendant of the old common law action of trover, and for that reason is commonly listed under the heading trover and conversion. You may have seen a reference to it in your civil procedure course. Because it developed out of a common law writ, parties are entitled to a jury trial in such actions brought in federal court. Parties are entitled to a jury trial in such actions brought in federal court. I read that. Trespass and trover were both actions founded upon possession, and for some centuries they remained as alternative remedies for the wrongful taking or damaging of chattels. There is, however, one important difference between them as to the measure of damages. The theory of trespass to chattels was that the plaintiff remained the owner of the chattel with possession merely interrupted or interfered with, so that when the chattel was returned, the owner had to accept it, and recovery was limited to damages to the chattel or to reimbursement for the time it was missing. The theory of trover was that the defendant was converting the chattel to the defendant's use, had appropriated the plaintiff's property, for which he was required to meet compensation generally computed as market value at the time and place of conversion. The defendant did not have the option of simply returning the chattel by paying damages. The third note in question, in each of the following cases was the interference of the plaintiff's chattel serious enough to warrant the action for conversion? A. Plaintiff and defendant owned a house as tenants in common. During dispute over ownership, defendant notified plaintiff that if he did not remove his furniture, she would have it removed. She did so, informing him of the location. And this was in Zaslow vs. Kroner of California, 1946. No conversion, trespass to chattels for which plaintiff may recover. Only actual damages suffered by reason of loss of use of the property. B. Similar facts, except that defendant removes the furniture to a warehouse at a distance, so that plaintiff is subject to substantial inconvenience and expense in recovering it. This is a conversion. Forstick vs. Collins in the English Reporter of 1816, and Electric Power Company vs. the Mayor of New York in 1899. C. Similar facts, except that defendant does not notify plaintiff. This is a conversion. And we're given cases McGonigal vs. Victor of Massachusetts, 1904, Oregon Powers Furniture Company vs. Reeling in Minnesota of 1942. D. Similar facts, except that defendant stores the furniture in his own name with the intent to keep it for himself. This is a conversion, and we cite Hicks Rubber Company Distributors vs. Stacy in Texas, 1939. E. Similar facts, except that while the furniture is in the warehouse and before the plaintiff can remove it, it is destroyed by fire. This is a conversion. Citing McCurdy and Wallbloom Furniture and Carpet Company, Minnesota, 1905. What would plaintiff show as actual damages to support a cause of action for trespass to chattels if the dispossession was not serious enough for conversion? A conversion may occur when one who is authorized to use a chattel uses it in a manner exceeding the authorization. See Swish Manufacturing Southeast vs. Manhattan Fire and Marine Insurance. And this was, I think, a federal case in the 11th Circuit, dated 1982, applying Georgia law. Lease permitted use of aircraft for transporting passengers, and lessee used aircraft for transportation of contraband. A type of case that once was common is Doolittle v. Shaw, Iowa, 1894. Defendant rented a horse from plaintiff to be driven to Manchester and back. Defendant drove the horse 6 or 7 miles into the country beyond Manchester without damaging it. It was held that this was not a conversion, but if the horse had been seriously injured in an accident while it was beyond Manchester, with or without the defendant's fault, there would have been a conversion. Now in Palmer v. Mayo, that is cited Connecticut 1907, and Baxter v. Woodward, Michigan 1916. 6 is a human body part property that can be converted. Plaintiff's spleen was removed as part of his treatment for cancer. Later, plaintiff discovered that his doctors had used cells from the removed spleen to develop a cell line for which they obtained a patent. The patent was then licensed for commercial development. Does plaintiff have a conversion action against the doctors and the commercial developer? That's the question. For California in 1990, and they held there was no conversion for excise body parts. Accord, Culpeper v. Pearl Street Building of Colorado, 1994, in action by parents against those involved in mistaken cremation of a son's body. Court ruled there is no property right in a body that would support a conversion claim. Most courts do, however, recognize that the next of kin have some protected interest in the possession for burial and cremation and to prevent mutilation of the body, sometimes called a quasi-property right. See, for example, Wally v. County of Tuscola. In the Sixth Circuit, probably a federal court system, unauthorized removal of corneas and eyes during autopsies, discussing Ohio and Michigan law and protected interest of kin of next of kin to possess and prevent mutilation of body. Those rights do not extend to being informed that body parts had been withheld by the coroner for further testing, or the right to later claim the withheld body parts for interment or disposal. In Albrecht v. Tryon, Ohio, 2008, answering in the negative certified question from federal district court that had before it a putative class action against all of Ohio's coroners. 7. Is an eminent domain name a form of intangible property that can be converted? This was tried in the federal law court system, 2003, applying California law, saying that plaintiff's complaint stated a cause of action for conversion of domain name sex.com. The restatement second of torts has undertaken to identify that the factors that influence courts in determining if a conversion has taken place when there has been interference with chattel. It provides in section 222A what constitutes conversion. 1. Conversion is an intentional exercise of dominion or control over a chattel which so seriously interferes with the right of another to control it that the actor may justly be required to pay the other the full value of the chattel. 2. In determining the seriousness of the interference and the justice of requiring the actor to pay the full value, the following factors are important. A. The extent and duration of the actor's exercise of dominion or control. B. The actor's intent to assert a right, in fact, inconsistent with the other's right of control. C. The actor's good faith. D, the extent and duration of the resulting interference with the other's right of control. E, the harm done to the chattel. And F, the inconvenience and expense caused to the other. The ways in which an actor may convert a chattel, for example, intentionally exercise dominion and control over it that so seriously interferes with the owner's right to control it that it is just to require the actor to pay its full value, include the following. 1. Acquiring possession of it, which is stealing chattel. 2. Damaging or altering it, for example, intentionally running over an animal and killing it. 3. Using it, a bailee seriously violates the terms of the bailment. 4. Receiving it, obtaining possession after a purchase from a thief. 5. Disposing of it, a bailee wrongfully sells the chattel. 6. Misdelivering it, delivery to wrong person by mistake so that the chattel is lost. And 7. Refusing to surrender it, bailee refuses to return the chattel. See Restatement Second of Torts, Section 223, and following sections. Now we're on page 86, which is letter B of the conversion section, titled Effect of Good Faith. An individual may be subject to liability for conversion, although he was not subjectively at fault. This can occur in at least 2 ways. 1. When the defendant intends to effect the chattel in a manner inconsistent with the plaintiff's right of control. The fact that he acted in good faith and under a mistake does not prevent liability for conversion. Thus, if a bailee delivers goods to an impostor or on the basis of a forged document, he is liable to the bailer or owner. See Bayer v. Slater of Massachusetts, 1927. The defendant delivers goods to an impostor. Potomac Insurance Company v. Nixon, Utah, 1924. Garage delivers car to person who presented a stolen duplicate parking ticket. Suzuki v. Small, the Appellate Division of New York, 1925. Steel sent to the wrong company. That occurred in Ranson v. Kittner. So I just stated all of those cases probably out of order. Anyway, some special rules have developed at common law for the protection of bailees and servants who deal with the chattel of third persons under directions from their bailers or employers. These are rules of commercial convenience, and the reason underlying them is clearly the practical necessity of permitting someone to receive goods for storage and safekeeping or transportation without inquiry as to the title of the person from whom they are received. If, for example, a garage accepting an automobile for overnight parking were to be held liable for conversion when it turned out to be a stolen car, there would be few people willing to operate a parking garage. This privilege does not extend to a case in which the goods are in the hands of the bailee or servant, and they are claimed from him by both the bailer or employer and the true owner. In this case, the bailee or servant is required at his peril to see that he delivers to the right person, and he becomes liable for conversion if he delivers to the wrong one. To avoid this risk, the law provides interpleader or other modern statutes that permit the goods to be deposited in court. 2. The other major area in which an innocent conversion may take place concerns good faith purchasers, those who buy the goods not knowing they were converted. An innocent purchaser cannot obtain title from a thief because a thief does not have title. The purchaser acts at her peril and may be sued in conversion by the true owner. In O'Keefe v. Snyder, title to 3 of Georgia O'Keeffe's paintings could not have passed to a putative owner because the artist testified that they had been stolen from her late husband's gallery some 30 years before they reappeared at defendant's gallery. The good faith purchaser is protected, however, and if the goods were obtained by the converter through fraud rather than theft, because title passes in the fraudulent transaction subject to the equitable right of rescission. That is, when the seller discovers the fraud, he can rescind the sale and take back the title. But the right to rescind for fraud is terminated when a bona fide purchaser acquires the title and possession from the defrauding party. And this is from Phelps and McQuaid of New York, 1917, when jewels sold on credit to impostor who sold them to bona fide purchaser and then disappeared without paying for them could not be reclaimed by the jewelers from bona fide purchaser because title had passed before the sale could be rescinded for fraud. There is thus a distinction between stolen goods, as to which the legal title does not pass, and the bona fide purchaser is therefore not protected, and goods obtained by fraud, as to which the title does pass, subject to an equitable right of rescission, which is cut off by a bona fide purchase. Finally, the Uniform Commercial Code provides that a bona fide purchaser is subject in a sale by goods from a merchant who deals in goods of that kind. And that's from the UCC section 2-432. Whether a bona fide purchaser is protected depends on the circumstances. Consider these examples. 1. Teenager leaves his bicycle in the front yard and it is stolen by a thief who cleans it up and sells it to a college student through an ad on Craigslist. College student is the converter and would have to pay the teenager the full value of the bicycle. Teenager is tricked into trading his bicycle for a foreign stamp the trickster claims is worth at least $1,000. By the time teenager learns the stamp is worthless, the bicycle has been sold to the college student. College student is not a converter, and teenager has lost the right to rescind the deal. 3. Teenager leaves his bicycle at a shop that sells and repairs bicycles. Merchant sells the bicycle to college student. College student is not a converter because the merchant deals in goods of that kind. In all three scenarios, teenager would have a cause of action for conversion against the thief, trickster, or merchant. The college student may be easier to find, however. Money and negotiable instruments, example checks, are not treated the same way as tangible chattels. In Kelly Car Company vs. Maryland Casualty Company, California of 1956, if thief steals teenager's $20 bill and trades it to a college student for 2 tens, college student is not a converter and teenager's only recourse is against thief. C, under the title of conversion, was necessity of demand, return of chattel. Demand. Some states have followed the rule that possession by a bona fide purchaser or other innocent converter is not in itself a sufficiently serious defiance of the owner's rights, and hold the possessor is liable only if refusing to return the goods on demand. In most states, however, a conversion occurs as soon as the defendant takes dominion and control over the goods in a manner inconsistent with the plaintiff's ownership. In these states, there may be a separate act of conversion for an initial taking of possession and for a later refusal to return on demand, and the owner can elect between them. Restatement second of Torts 229. Return. When a converter offers to return the converted goods and the owner accepts, the return does not bar the action for conversion, but it must be taken into account to reduce the damages recovered. If the chattel is in the same condition as when it was taken, has not changed in value, and the plaintiff has suffered no special damage through being deprived of possession, the effect may be to reduce his recovery to nominal damages. When the plaintiff refuses to accept the offered return, the older rule was that the defendant could not force the goods back upon him in reduction of the damages. The plaintiff could insist upon the full value of the goods as a measure of damages, and the defendant had to keep them. In Professor Warren's phrasing, defendant had bought something. The English courts and some American jurisdictions have held that when the conversion is an innocent one committed under an honest mistake, the court may require the plaintiff to take back the goods and credit the defendant with their value in any case in which the goods are undamaged and there has been no change in the plaintiff's position. The matter is within the sound discretion of the trial court, and even in these jurisdictions there is no absolute right to the return of them as a matter of law. See Rutland and W.R. Company versus the Bank of Middlebury, Vermont, 1860. The Restatement Second of Torts has followed this approach in Section 922. Payment of the chattel's value by a converter to the original owner effectuates a common law forced sale of the chattel and precludes the original owner's further recovery of damages for subsequent conversions. That's Barham versus Barugia of the Third Circuit of the federal court system applying Pennsylvania law. Trainer of racehorse gave horse to defendants as payment of trainer's debt. Plaintiff owner of racehorse filed a conversion action against defendants and was awarded value of horse and punitive damages. On appeal, court found that because plaintiff had already collected the full value of the horse from the trainer, the acceptance of that payment was a forced sale to trainer, and thus plaintiff did not have a conversion action against defendants. Is the judgment for plaintiff sufficient for this purpose too? Now, letter D under the conversion section 8 of chapter 2 is titled damages. The measure of damages for conversion is the value of the property converted. Usually this is the market value, what the property could have been sold for in the open market by a willing seller to a willing buyer. For elaboration on this and indication of other recoverable damages, see Restatement Second of Torts, section 927. The market value is determined at the time and place of conversion. The theory is that if the chattel is available on the market, the owner should mitigate damages by purchasing another chattel. This need not be done at the very moment of the conversion. While some courts would give him the highest intermediate value between the time of conversion and the time of the suit of judgment. The rule approved by most commentators is the high intermediate value between the time of conversion and a reasonable time for making a replacement. If there is no market value, other methods may be used, such as manufacturing costs less depreciation. See Restatement Second of Torts, section 911. Sometimes the property destroyed or damaged has little market worth and has a particular value to the owner. Damages cannot be recovered for sentiment alone, but if the defendant's conduct is outrageous, the plaintiff may be able to recover damages for emotional harm suffered from the loss. See Laporte v. Associated Independence, Inc. This is Florida, 1964. Trash collector killed pet dog by throwing garbage can at it. And Womack vs. Reardon, Washington, 2006. Teenagers took cat from porch, doused it with gasoline, and set it on fire. In cases where the converted chattels were of limited extrinsic or market value, the original or replacement cost or cost of repair of the chattel may be awarded. Lakewood Engineering and Manufacturing Company vs. Quinn, 1992. Maryland. Allowing replacement value for household items lost in fire. Damages for a replacement cost for chattel that is the product of creative effort as to which no original or replacement cost can fairly be assigned may be based upon the value of the time that it took or would take to create the chattel. Wood vs. Kennard, the Second Circuit of the federal court system, taking into account the value of 2 years of intermittent labor required to reproduce lost manuscripts. Radkovic vs. Alfred Mosner Company, Illinois, Pierre, 1990, compensating for 172 hours of architectural time at a specified rate necessary to redo damaged architectural drawings. United States vs. Aurora, which is federal law, tried in Maryland, 1994. Compensation is based on hourly rate of lab technician to create a cell line destroyed by a rival scientist. UBC versus Vasily, which was 2009, colleagues testified as to value of college professors' class notes, teaching materials, research notes, laboratory equipment, and experiments in progress. Red wine versus Fitzhugh, Wyoming, 1958, allowing recovery for value of seed and for labor expended sowing and cultivating seed. Punitive damages may be allowed when the conversion was malicious, but not when it was done innocently. E, under the conversion section, what may be converted. Because of its origin as an action against the finder of lost goods, Trover was limited to the conversion of things that were capable of being lost and found. It would lie for any chattel, but not for land which in the eyes of the law could not be lost. Hence, the disposition or withholding of real property could not be conversion, nor could the severance of timber, minerals, crops, or fixtures attached to the land. Once there was severance, however, the goods became chattels, and the plaintiff could bring Trover for their removal from the land. These rules are still applied. Since tangible rights, such as those of a stockholder in a corporation, could not be lost and found, the original common law rule was that they could not be the subject of a conversion. This has been considerably modified since Reuben conversion of choses in action. 10 Fordham L. R.E.V. 14/1941. It was first held that damages could be recovered for the conversion of intangible rights when they were merged and identified with a special instrument such as a promissory note, a check, a bill of lading, or a stock certificate, and that instrument itself was converted. This has now been generally extended to permit recovery of the conversion of rights of a kind customarily merged with such an instrument, such as those of a stockholder without any conversion of the stock certificate itself. Herrick and Humphrey Hardware Company, Herrick vs. Humphrey Hardware Company, Nebraska, 1905, refusal to register or transfer on the books of the corporation, depriving the new owner of his rights as a stockholder. What about the data stored electronically on a computer? Thyroff vs. Nationwide Mutual Insurance Company, in New York, 2007. Answering certified question in the affirmative, court found personnel and client information of former insurance agents stored on a computer that belonged to insurance company to be property for purposes of agent's conversion claim. What if an attorney who is leaving his law firm takes with her the files of 70 of the firm's clients? Is she liable for conversion of the files? Is the law firm becomes her new employer? See Parker vs. Kowalski, and with the lower court's conclusion that first law was Kowalski and Hirschhorn. While we agree with the lower court's conclusion that first law firm stated a viable cause of action in conversion against attorney, we do not believe that this allegation demonstrates that first law firm had a possessory interest in those fees that were received by second law firm from work performed for clients whose files have been converted. Letter F, the last section under conversion, is titled Who May Maintain the Action. Trover Lake Craft House is founded upon the plaintiff's possession from From this has come the rule that anyone in possession of chattel at the time of the conversion can maintain an action for it. Thus the finder can can recover for conversion. See Igler Rights of Finders, Michigan, 1928. Moreland Rights of Finders, Kentucky, 1927. The same is true of a bailee to whom the chattel is loaned, although he has no other interest in it, or a sheriff who has seized it on execution. Recovery has been permitted even when the plaintiff's possession is wrongful and in defiance of the true owner. Thus, one converter may recover from another. Jeffreys v. Great Western and Company. English Reporter, 1856. In this case, however, the plaintiff usually has had some colorable claim of right to the chattel, and it has been held that in the absence of such a claim, there is no recovery. Trover was also extended to permit recovery by one who did not have possession but had the immediate right to it, as in the case of a bailior at one of the cases, an English Reporter dated 1849, or a mortgage after default, Nicholas and Shepherd Company versus Minnesota Russian Manufacturing Company. This too has been carried over into modern law for conversion. Of conversion.